All right. Well, all right. Welcome back to WMAC Now with your host, Chuck Stevenson. So, it's not exactly a secret that women's bantamweight in the UFC has been somewhat stagnant the last several years. I mean, they finally signed a pair of newcomers last year who looked to be pretty exciting in Jocelyn Edwards and Josiane Nunes. But for the most part, they've been signing fighters like very piecemeal and not it's very few and far in between with that division. You look at the top 15 here, and a number of them have been in the UFC for several years now. And that's the majority. And honestly, the top 15 is the majority of the women's bantamweights that are already in the UFC. So it's not exactly the most populous women's division right now. And with Juliana Pena coming out and defeating Amanda Nunes, upsetting the apple cart, as it were, this division is wide open. Excuse me, is wide open again. And there's a lot of opportunity to move up, but also there's a lot of opportunity to bring in new prospects and young up and comers and get them into the mix as well. So the purpose of this video is to highlight some of the fighters that are outside of the UFC in this division that I feel that the UFC should definitely work to sign in 2022. So I've assembled 7 fighters that the UFC should sign in 2022, and I've added 3 more that aren't UFC ready yet, but that they should definitely keep an eye on. So this is really a video just meant to introduce you to some of these fighters, give you some basic facts on them, and you might actually see a few familiar faces. Well, you'll definitely see a few familiar faces in here. Even a couple of UFC veterans that deserve to be brought back. So I, did a little bit of research on this one, and I like the list that I was able to put together here because, even outside the UFC, sometimes it's hard to find some bantamweights. You got to really go into the regional scene to find some of them. And the regionals have actually been doing a really good job lately in the past year or so with developing this division. They've been doing some good legwork. And I think 2022 is the time for the UFC to take advantage of that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the bantamweights the UFC should sign in 2022. First up, we have Lucia Sabova of Slovakia. So Lucia is 24 years old. She stands 5 feet, 8 inches tall. She has an undefeated, perfect record of 6 wins, no losses. Her last fight was a unanimous decision win at Octagon 26 back in July. She was supposed to fight a couple weeks ago. Unfortunately, that fight got canceled due to her opponent testing positive for COVID. Listen, Sabova is an exciting prospect. Okay, she's got good size for bantamweight, 5 feet 8 inches. She's got striking. She was one of the nominees for my KO of the Year award. And she has some submission wins too. So she's a good, well-rounded fighter. And I'll tell you what, she's got a good audience there in Eastern Europe, in Czech Republic and Slovakia. She fights in Octagon, and they are screaming her name the entire time she's fighting. So she's got a good fan base already going for her. She's an exciting fighter and one that the UFC should definitely look to sign. If she's not Octagon bantamweight champ by the end of this year, probably only be because the UFC snatched her up beforehand. So next on the list is someone that should definitely be familiar to viewers of this channel because I've talked about her multiple times. I've covered multiple fights of hers. And she is one of the unheralded prospects in this sport. Definitely an unheralded prospect in this sport. Tanisha Tennant. Tanisha is 32 years old. She stands 5 feet 7 inches tall. She has a professional record of 4-1, and it honestly goes deeper than that. And her last fight was a unanimous decision win at Invicta 44 in August, excuse me, of this past year, where she defeated Lisa Rizzosa to capture the Invicta FC Bantamweight title. Tanisha, if you haven't seen her fight, you really should watch her fight. She is an exceptional long-range distance fighter. Very good at using her height and reach to her advantage. If you want to look to see someone who doesn't necessarily have a lot of pro experience, but fights like a veteran, Tanisha Tennant is that fighter. And like I said, she has the height, she has reach, and she knows how to use it, which is something that most experienced fighters have a hard time grasping, and she does it with technically only 5 professional fights. Now, she's also the winner of one of the Invicta Phoenix tournaments, the one-night 8-women tournaments. She won it for the Bantamweights, and that was, at the time, it was all Bantamweights with like very little pro experience. And she stood head and shoulders above her competition that night. Easiest. She basically cruised her way to that one. Now, my one gripe with her is that she lacks a killer instinct from what I've seen. I've seen fights where she definitely could have poured it on and gotten the finish, and she just doesn't seem to. Either she doesn't seem to see it, or she's hesitant. That's just my personal gripe. I like to see fighters that can recognize when to go for it. But Tennant already should have been in the UFC by now. They had her on a contender series. They put her in against that Danielle Wolf. Arguably won that fight. That was a bad judge's decision. And yeah, I'm surprised the UFC hasn't picked her up since then. But she came back last year, picked up the Invicta title. Probably going to defend it sometime this year, and then I would not be surprised at all if the UFC signs her after that. Most deserving. Next up on the list, another Invicta veteran, Lisa Rizzosa. Lisa is 26 years old. She stands 5 feet 6 inches tall, has a record of 6-2, and her last fight was a unanimous decision loss to Tanisha Tennant at Invicta 44. Rizzosa is a pretty skilled all-around fighter. Has some things that she needs to work on. She's still pretty raw, but she's developing. And every time she fights, she develops a little bit more. And most importantly, she's an exciting fighter. And when you have encounter fans that say, "Oh, the women's fights are boring," show them one of Lisa Rizzosa's fights. They're not going to think the ladies' fights are all boring after they've seen Lisa fight. So that's why I included Lisa in this list. Now, her 2 losses came in Invicta title fights. So she's 0-2 in title fights there so far. But man, those fights were exciting scraps. So she's not championship potential yet, but she's working on it. She's definitely a work in progress, and she can continue that development in the UFC as well. Then we move over to Europe for Ukrainian Ekaterina Shakalova. Shakalova is 24 years old. She is the shortest fighter on this list at 5 feet 2 inches tall. She has a record of 6-1. And her last fight, she scored a submission win at FEN 34 in May of last year. So hasn't been active recently. But Shakalova is another fighter, very well-rounded, has wins by TKO, has wins by submission, a very skilled ground fighter. And that is important because, you don't always run into a lot of skilled ground fighters in the ladies divisions. Honestly, you look at the ladies divisions, it's mostly striker heavy, and you need some good ground fighters to round out the mix here. And Shakalova is definitely one. She's got a nice record so far. She's got that prospect record. She's young, at 24 years old. She has a variety of wins. She has the killer instinct. She's definitely someone you want to watch. And she's got that Eastern European background going for her as well. Then we move on to someone that everyone who watches this channel should be familiar with, because she's already a UFC veteran, Lucia Pudalova. Pudalova is 27 years old, stands 5 feet 8 inches tall, has a professional record of 12-7. Now, her last fight was a split decision win at Octagon Prime 4 in November of this past year, 2021. So does Pudalova have the prettiest record on this thing? No. And I feel a lot of that was just bad matchmaking. But she, since she got cut from the UFC, she's continued to improve. She had a nice win streak going, took a loss, and then bounced back with a win. And she showed a lot of growth in her last fight. She switched camps, went to SBG Ireland, and really worked out for her. She showed a willingness more to go to the ground more as a fighter. So she has shown that she is trying to improve and make up for the places where she lacks as a fighter. And honestly, here's why the UFC needs Pudalova back. So there's a phrase to describe some fighters in boxing that you don't hear too often in MMA, but I'm going to use it to describe Pudalova. She's a TV fighter. Okay? If she tunes in, she's going to put on a fun, exciting bout. And those are the bouts that you want people to watch, because she's the type of fighter that when people watch, they're gonna know that she delivers. She's gonna deliver exciting fights, and that's gonna get people to tune in. So you bring Pudalova in, you put her in there with other exciting fighters. She's gonna bring it every time, and she's gonna get eyes to her, and then that's gonna get people to notice when she's on an event. She's a TV fighter. Is Pudalova ever going to challenge for the UFC title? Maybe not. But is she going to bring action every single fight? Definitely. And that's why the UFC should definitely look to bring her back. And I believe if she gets 1 or 2 more wins, I have no doubt that they will. I'm surprised they didn't bring her back last year. But Lucia is definitely a fighter that they need to bring back. Next, we have Hailey Cowan. Hailey is 29 years old, stands a very statuesque 5 feet 9 inches tall. She has a professional record of 5 wins to 2 losses. And her last bout was an unfortunate submission loss at LFA 91 in September of 2020. Now, Hailey hasn't fought in a while. However, she has a fight coming up a little less than a week from the time of this recording at Invicta, I believe, number 45, where she takes on, I believe, Monica Franco. Hailey does it all. She has wins by subs. She has wins by by strikes. She shows a lot of skills, and she looks to be very promising. Up until now, she's fought exclusively for LFA. Now she's going to be stepping into the Invicta cage for the first time. Very excited to see how she does there. She is definitely on the path to the UFC, and would not be surprised if after this next fight she gets called up. And plus, she has the look. She has the aesthetics too. No lie. That's definitely something the UFC looks out for. And then finally on the list of fighters that the UFC should sign, last but certainly not least, is Sarah Kaufman. UFC veteran already. So Sarah's 36 years old. She stands 5 feet 5 inches tall, and she has a very impressive record of 22 wins and 5 losses. And her last bout was a TKO win at BTC 13 in November of 2021. the UFC never should have let Sarah Kaufman go. The reason why is somewhat common knowledge. It's mostly suspicion. No one knows why for sure, but everyone suspects it was because of her not taking fights for a while, and then when she finally did take a fight, she lost to a short notice opponent in future flyweight champ Valentina Shevchenko, and then they let her go, and that was a good several years ago now. And Sarah's done really well since then. She captured the Invicta title. She went to the PFL, made it all the way to the semifinals at lightweight. So she moved up 2 divisions to lightweight, made it all the way to the semifinals of the PFL, taking on women that were much bigger than her. Now she's moves back down to won a featherweight bout, her last bout, and now she's moving back down to bantamweight, and she has a fight coming up in about a week for the Canadian all-women's promotion, Palace Athena. Honestly, I don't know what the UFC is waiting on. They should re-sign her. She's one of the most experienced bantamweights in the sport, period, and definitely the most experienced bantamweight outside the UFC has to be. If there's a more experienced active bantamweight fighter outside the UFC, I'm struggling to think of it. UFC should not have let her go, and they definitely should have signed her back a while ago, because for all the reasons I listed at the beginning of this video. Okay, so that's the list of fighters that the UFC should definitely try to sign in 2022. Here are 3 fighters that they should keep an eye on this year, just in case they have really good years this year. First up, we have Marissa Sanchez. Marissa is 23 years old. She stands 5 feet 7 inches tall. She has a professional record of 2-1. Her last fight was a split decision win for Combate Global back in September. Marissa is one I am definitely keeping my eye on, and I hope the UFC is keeping their eye on her as well. She has a very exciting style, a very crowd-pleasing style, a very exciting, action-oriented style. Has some decent skill, and let's be honest here, she has the aesthetics too. So she's got it all going for her. And I believe she's Mexican-American, so she could appeal to that fan base as well. Definitely a fighter the UFC should keep an eye on. Next up, also a Combate veteran, is Lucero Acosta. Lucero is 27 years old. She stands 5 feet 6 inches tall. She has a pro record of 2-2. Her last fight was a split decision loss at Combate in August of 2021. Acosta is an exciting fighter. She has a win by knockout. She's an action-oriented fighter, exciting, howls at her opponent in the cage. And let's not lie, this isn't the best picture of her, but she definitely has the aesthetics going for her. Definitely someone the UFC should keep an eye on. And then finally, Chantelle Killa Coates. Coates is 34 years old. She stands 5 feet 3 inches tall and has a pro record of 2-1. Her last fight was a split decision win at Combate in August of 2021. If I remember correctly, it was over Lucero Acosta. I was there for Coates' professional debut. It was at Invicta, and she absolutely knocked her opponent out. Now, she hasn't quite lived up to that yet, but I still see the potential in there for her. She has the power in her hands. If she lets it go, she can definitely be exciting. And I think the UFC should definitely be keeping an eye on her. She also has a fight coming up in February against Bellator veteran Christina Williams, so definitely keep an eye out for that one. So those are my fighters that the UFC should sign in 2022. with a few more that they should keep an eye on. Like I said, the UFC kind of let this division stagnate for a few years. They signed a couple of prospects last year, but I think this year they should definitely take advantage of the prospects that are out there and bring them back in. And even bring back in a few of the veterans like Pudalova and Kaufman. Right now, this division is wide open. Take advantage. Sign these prospects and veterans. Get them in there. Get them in the mix. Really shake this division up and get it going. Get it exciting again. Like back in the days when Ronda was the champion. And then when Tate won, and then or Holm won, and then Tate won, and the division was just, you didn't know what was going to go happen next in this division. With with Pena beating Nunes again, the division's exciting again. It's like she blew the division wide open. We got some movement going on in the rankings again lately. Now is the perfect time to be signing some new fighters, inject some new blood into this division. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments down below. If you like the video, please give it a like. And while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe to WMMA Now, the most complete women's mixed martial arts dedicated platform on YouTube. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.